My young child was in ICU fighting for their life due to illness, but my parents called me demanding I come mow their lawn, saying their yard work was more important than my dying kid. My name is Tyler, and I'm 29 years old. I'm a single father to the most amazing 6-year-old kid you'll ever meet. His name is Ethan. His mother walked out on us when he was just 2 years old, which is unfortunately a classic story that way too many single parents know all too well. So it's been just me and my boy holding it down together ever since then. And honestly, we've made a pretty good team. I work as a union plumber and own my own small plumbing contracting business. I've got a crew of 4 guys working with me, and while it's nothing fancy or glamorous, we get by pretty well financially. Actually, we do better than my family thinks we do, which becomes incredibly important later in this story. My family has always been completely messed up, and I mean that in the absolute worst possible way. My mother, Linda, is one of those women who genuinely believes the world owes her everything just for existing. Picture a 52-year-old woman who still acts like she's the homecoming queen from 1989, completely obsessed with appearances, money, and what the neighbors think about everything. She's the type of person who judges people entirely by what kind of car they drive and thinks manual labor is beneath her precious family's status. My sister Stephanie is the golden child of the family. She's married to some finance guy named Derek, who wears designer suits every day and drives a Mercedes. They live in this absolutely ridiculous McMansion in the wealthy part of town with 2 spoiled brats named Sophia, who's 7, and Lucas, who's 4. These kids have never heard the word no in their entire lives and throw complete tantrums whenever they don't get the latest tablet or designer clothes they want. My father Frank just nods along with whatever my mother says to avoid her screaming fits. He's been doing this pathetic dance for over 25 years now and figured out long ago that agreeing with Linda is much easier than dealing with her dramatic outbursts. The man honestly hasn't had an original thought or opinion since the Bush administration. I've always been the family disappointment because I work with my hands instead of wearing a suit to some fancy office building. I'm also the one who actually calls out their nonsense when they're being completely ridiculous, which apparently makes me the difficult one in their eyes. They've made it crystal clear over the years that Ethan and I are basically the charity cases of the family, the ones they tolerate at Thanksgiving dinner, but talk about behind our backs the rest of the year. I should also mention my best friend and business partner, Rico. This guy has been my ride or die since we were juniors in high school, getting detention together for various stupid teenage antics. He's this short, stocky Puerto Rican guy who looks like he should be running a food truck in Miami, but he can fix any plumbing problem faster and better than anyone I know in the business. Rico has absolutely zero filter and says exactly what everyone's thinking, but is too polite to say out loud. He's been telling me for years that my family is toxic as hell. "Tyler, your mom's crazier than a bag of cats," he'd say while we're running pipes through some office building. "And your sister, she's got more red flags than a communist parade." I'm telling you, these people are going to screw you over someday. Rico was completely right about everything, but I always figured family was family, you know? Boy, was I ever wrong about that assumption. Anyway, last June, about 18 months ago now, I was on a job site finishing up some commercial plumbing work for a new dental building when my phone rang. It was Ethan's school calling, and I could tell immediately that something was terribly wrong because the principal's voice was shaking like a leaf in the wind. She told me there had been a serious accident. Some poor guy had suffered a sudden medical emergency while driving and lost consciousness behind the wheel, causing his car to run a red light and T-bone the school bus that was carrying Ethan and 12 other kids. The impact was so severe that the bus flipped completely onto its side. Several children were seriously injured in the crash, but Ethan got the absolute worst of it because he was sitting right in the seat where the car made impact. I honestly don't remember much about getting to the hospital that day. I know Rico drove my truck because I was completely losing my mind, with my hands shaking so badly that I couldn't even dial my phone properly to call anyone. What I do remember clear as day is the doctor finding me in the sterile waiting room with that specific look on his face. You know, the one that means your entire world is about to get turned upside down and stomped on. Ethan had suffered severe head trauma, internal bleeding, broken ribs, a fractured arm, and a punctured lung. He was rushed into emergency surgery, and the medical team honestly didn't know if he would make it through the night. The surgeon told me to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best, which is basically medical speak for, your kid might die, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. The next 22 hours were just me sitting in that sterile waiting room, drinking terrible hospital coffee that tasted like burnt rubber, and praying to every god I could think of. Even though I'm not really a religious guy, I called everyone I could think of. My boss, Ethan's teacher, even his soccer coach. But I didn't call my family because I knew they would somehow find a way to make this entire situation about themselves. When they finally let me see him after the surgery, my tough little man looked so incredibly small and fragile. He was hooked up to all these machines with tubes everywhere, monitors beeping constantly, and a ventilator breathing for him. He was on life support in a medically induced coma, and the doctors couldn't tell me if he would wake up or what condition he might be in if he did wake up. The neurologist was brutally honest with me about the situation. Brain injuries in children are incredibly unpredictable, he explained. Ethan could wake up completely fine, or he could have permanent disabilities that would affect him for the rest of his life, or he might never wake up at all. They simply had to wait and see what happened. On the first night, I finally broke down and called my mother, crying like a baby. "Mom, I need you here," I sobbed into the phone. "Ethan's really bad. He might not make it through this." You know what she actually said to me? She sighed like I was interrupting her favorite soap opera or something equally trivial. "Oh, Tyler, you're always so dramatic about everything," she said dismissively. "Kids are tough as nails. He'll bounce back from this. I can't just drop everything and drive 5 hours because you're panicking over nothing." Panicking over nothing. My 6-year-old son was in a medically induced coma fighting for his life, and she called my desperate plea for support. Panicking over nothing. That should have been my first major clue about what kind of people I was really dealing with, but grief makes you stupid and desperate for any kind of family support. Rico basically moved into the hospital with me during that first week. He brought me real food, because hospital cafeteria stuff is complete garbage, dealt with all the insurance paperwork because I couldn't focus on anything except Ethan, and even convinced the nurses to let him set up a cot in Ethan's room so I could sleep next to my boy. "Your kid's going to pull through this," Rico kept saying, even when the doctors weren't so optimistic about the prognosis. "Ethan's got your stubborn streak, and Martinez men don't quit on anything. Kid's going to be absolutely fine." The nurses absolutely loved Rico because he would crack jokes and keep everyone's spirits up, even when everything was falling apart around us. "Hey, nurse, you got any good cafeteria food recommendations?" he'd ask with a grin, pointing at me. "Because this guy has been living on vending machine garbage and energy drinks for 4 days straight, and I'm starting to worry about his health too." For 4 long, agonizing days, I lived in that hospital room, holding Ethan's small hand and reading him his favorite comic books out loud, hoping desperately that he could hear me somewhere deep in that medical coma. The doctor had told me that hearing was often the last sense to go and the first to come back, so I talked to him constantly about absolutely everything I could think of. School, soccer, the new video game he'd been wanting for weeks. Then Saturday afternoon happened, and that's when I learned what my family really thought of me and my dying son. Saturday afternoon, while I'm sitting there watching machines keep my son Ethan alive, my phone suddenly buzzes with a text message. It's from my mother. "Tyler, my bathroom faucet is leaking again. Come fix it this weekend. Bring your tools." I stared at that text message for a full 12 minutes, completely unable to process what I was reading. My kid was in a coma fighting for his life, and she was worried about bathroom plumbing repairs. I texted back, "I can't. I'm at the hospital with Ethan, who's fighting for his life." Her response came back almost immediately. "Tyler, you always make everything about yourself with your dramatic behavior. Just because you can't handle stress doesn't mean the rest of us stop living our lives. The faucet's backed up, and I have garden club this Thursday." I actually laughed bitterly at that response. My sister Stephanie immediately jumped into the conversation. Stephanie texted, "Mom's absolutely right. Kids get hurt all the time. Sophia scraped her knee last week and didn't make this big dramatic deal about it. Stop being such a drama queen. Some of us have actual responsibilities to deal with." I couldn't believe what I was reading, so I texted back, "Ethan is on life support. He might actually die. How is this me being dramatic?" Then my father chimed in with the most devastating message of all. "Tyler, your mom's plumbing situation is more important than your attention-seeking behavior. You've always been jealous that Stephanie married well and has a successful life. Stop using your son to get sympathy from people." My own father had just accused me of using my dying son for attention and sympathy. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Rico walked into the room at that exact moment, saw the expression on my face, and immediately read the text messages over my shoulder. "Wait, let me get this straight," he said, his voice rising with disbelief. "Your kid's in a coma, and they want you to fix a bathroom faucet? Tyler, your family's always been nuts, but this is next-level crazy even for them." That's when the doctor entered the room looking extremely uncomfortable, like he had some very bad news to deliver. "Tyler, I need to tell you something important about your mother," he said carefully. "She called this morning claiming to be Ethan's grandmother and asking detailed questions about his condition and prognosis." He paused uncomfortably before continuing. "She asked very specific questions about Ethan's insurance situation, including his life insurance policy and who the beneficiaries would be if Ethan didn't survive this." The entire room started spinning around me. "What did you just say?" "She asked about end-of-life options," the doctor continued, taking a deep breath. "She specifically asked about organ donation procedures and whether there was any financial compensation involved in that process." Rico started pacing around the room, muttering angrily in Spanish under his breath. I felt completely sick to my stomach. "Doctor, what exactly did she say to you and your staff?" "She asked extremely detailed questions about brain death protocols, how long we typically keep patients on life support, the legal processes involved in end-of-life decisions. She wanted to know about organ donation compensation, life insurance implications, and funeral cost assistance programs." The realization hit me like a freight train. She had called the hospital asking about killing my son for money. "Did you discuss discontinuing Ethan's care with your mother at any point?" the doctor asked. "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "He's my kid, and I'd sell everything I own, live in my truck, and work 4 jobs simultaneously to keep him alive for as long as possible." Rico's voice rose with fury. "Tyler, your mother called this hospital asking about murdering your kid for cash. This isn't just family drama anymore. This is pure evil." Then it all clicked into place in my mind. My mother knew about Ethan's small life insurance policy from when I had started my business a few years back. She knew I'd been struggling financially since his mother had disappeared. But what my family didn't know, and what they had completely failed to realize, was that my plumbing business had actually been absolutely crushing it lately. I had landed 4 major commercial contracts, built up a solid savings account, paid off my house completely, and established excellent connections throughout the city. My mother still thought I was the broke single dad who might need family help someday. She was about to learn just how wrong she was about everything. "Doc, I need copies of every single conversation she had with your staff," I said. Rico looked at me with that specific expression I remembered from high school, right before he would suggest something that would definitely get us in trouble. "Tyler, what are you thinking right now?" "I'm thinking it's time my family learned exactly what happens when you mess with me and my son," I replied. "They just made the biggest mistake of their entire lives." That night, after Ethan's vitals had finally stabilized somewhat, I started planning something that would change everything. This wasn't just any ordinary plan. This was one that would show my family exactly what happens when you mess with a union plumber who knows how to hold grudges and has the professional connections to make people's lives very, very difficult. The next morning, Rico showed up with coffee and wearing his signature evil grin that I knew meant trouble. "Tyler, your family just messed with the wrong guy," he said, settling into the chair next to Ethan's bed. "Think about this situation for a minute. You're a union plumber who knows every contractor, inspector, and building official in 4 counties. Your mom lives in that fancy neighborhood where reputation matters more than anything else. Your sister's husband works at that investment firm where professional image is absolutely everything. Your dad's landscaping business depends entirely on word-of-mouth recommendations." I was starting to see exactly where he was going with this line of thinking, and I definitely liked it. "Plus, you've been doing plumbing work for half the rich people in this town for years," Rico continued enthusiastically. "It's time to call in some favors and let people know exactly what kind of family you're dealing with here. First, I meticulously documented absolutely everything. Every text message, every phone call, and I started recording all conversations with my family members. This was completely legal in our state with one-party consent laws, so I was covered legally. The text messages from my family kept coming throughout the entire weekend, and each one was more completely insane than the last. Mom texted, "Tyler, I don't care about your little tantrum. My faucet's getting worse by the day. I need it fixed before garden club this Thursday. These women are important social connections for our family." Stephanie sent, "Stop being so dramatic about Ethan's little accident. Sophia's dance recital is next weekend, and she specifically asked for you to bring those expensive chocolates she likes. She called my son's life-threatening coma a little accident. My son was in a medically induced coma fighting for his life, and she was worried about dance recital chocolates." Dad texted, "Tyler, your mom's birthday is next month, and you're organizing the party like you always do. The country club's already booked, so you need to find somewhere else to hold it." Rico read over my shoulder as these messages came in, getting angrier and angrier by the minute. Your kid's fighting for his life and they want birthday parties and plumbing fixes, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. Tyler, I've seen some messed up families in my time, but this is absolutely unbelievable. Wednesday brought a phone call from Stephanie that pushed me completely over the edge of rational thinking. Tyler, Derek's been telling everyone at his work about your family drama, she said casually. It's honestly embarrassing for all of us. Can you please tone down the attention-seeking behavior? Also, Lucas has soccer this Saturday, and we need you to help set up the field like you usually do. I hung up on her without saying a single word. I was completely done being hurt and confused by their behavior. Now I was just angry, and when I get angry, I get extremely focused and methodical. My doctor found me in the family lounge later that day, probably looking absolutely murderous. Tyler, how are you holding up through all of this? My family's acting like Ethan's accident is just an inconvenience to their social calendar, I told him honestly. They want me to fix bathroom faucets while my son's on life support, and they're complaining that his fight for life is embarrassing to them. He sat quietly for a long minute, clearly processing what I just told him. In 17 years of medical practice, I've seen families handle trauma in many different ways, he said finally. Some families pull together and become stronger, while others unfortunately fall apart under the pressure. But this level of callousness toward a critically injured child is both disturbing and highly unusual in my experience. They actually sent me a grocery list yesterday while Ethan was having serious breathing problems, I added. Have you considered the possibility of protecting yourself and Ethan from this level of toxicity? He asked gently. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us unconditionally end up hurting us the most, and that's especially dangerous during vulnerable times like this. That comment hit me like a lightning bolt. Protect Ethan. Not just medically from his injuries, but from these parasites who saw my son as nothing more than a dollar sign and an inconvenience to their comfortable lives. The next bombshell came from Ethan's physical therapist later that week. Tyler, did you give anyone permission to call asking detailed questions about Ethan's treatment plan and recovery process? My stomach immediately dropped. What happened exactly? Someone claiming to be Ethan's grandmother called asking extremely detailed questions about his recovery timeline and long-term care costs. She seemed particularly interested in potential permanent disabilities that might require expensive ongoing treatment. I was seeing red at this point. Those weren't questions from someone hoping your son gets better, the therapist continued. Those were questions from someone who seemed to be planning for him not to recover. The biggest revelation came that Saturday when my Uncle Greg called from across the state. Tyler, I just heard about Ethan's accident through the grapevine. How's he doing? He asked, with genuine concern in his voice. I would have called much sooner, but Linda told me you didn't want any family interference. She said you preferred complete privacy and were handling everything yourself without any outside help. My blood went completely cold as I processed what he was telling me. Uncle Greg, I never said anything like that. I've been desperately begging for help and support from anyone who would listen. There was a long, uncomfortable pause on the other end of the line. What exactly has Linda been telling people about this situation? It turns out that my mother had systematically called everyone in our extended family, along with church people, neighbors, and old high school friends, telling them all that I was handling Ethan's situation privately and didn't want any visitors or help because I was very independent and preferred dealing with difficult things completely alone. She had actively and deliberately prevented people from supporting us during the absolute worst time of our lives. She told me specifically that Ethan had suffered a minor concussion, Uncle Greg continued, his voice getting angrier, and that you were being overly dramatic for attention. Tyler, this is completely different from what you're telling me. Uncle Greg arrived the very next Sunday with his truck loaded full of home-cooked meals, clean clothes, and even a gaming system for Ethan's hospital room. He took one look at Ethan hooked up to all those machines and immediately started tearing up. Good grief, Tyler. This kid's been through absolute hell, he said, his voice shaking with emotion. How could Linda possibly call this a minor injury? This is serious, life-threatening trauma. Monday afternoon brought another confrontation when my mother called while Greg was sitting right there in Ethan's room. Tyler, Greg called me all upset about something. What lies have you been telling him about our family? I put her on speakerphone so Greg could hear everything she was about to say. No lies, Mom. Just the complete truth about Ethan's condition and how you've been acting throughout this entire crisis. How I've been acting? I've been nothing but supportive, she said defensively. I even called the hospital multiple times to check on Ethan's condition and see how he was doing. You called to ask about ending his life support and collecting insurance money, I said flatly. That's absolutely not what I did, she protested. I was asking about available options because I was worried about your medical bills piling up. I was being helpful and practical about the financial situation. Greg's eyes went wide as he listened to this conversation unfold. Mom, you specifically asked about organ donation money, brain death protocols, and life insurance payouts, I continued. Someone has to think practically about these things, she replied. You're too emotional to make rational decisions about what's best for everyone involved. Greg grabbed the phone from my hands. Linda, this is Greg. I'm sitting here looking at my great-nephew who is very much alive and getting better every single day. What you're describing isn't practical thinking. It's absolutely sick and twisted. Greg, you don't understand the full situation, she started to explain. I understand perfectly that you called asking about killing your grandson for money, Greg interrupted. I understand that you've been lying to prevent family support during a medical emergency. Linda, I've known you for 45 years, and I've never been more disgusted to call you my sister. She hung up immediately without another word. That night, Greg and I had a conversation that changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Greg started dropping some serious bombshells that explained my family's twisted behavior in ways I had never understood before. Tyler, your mom's always been obsessed with money and appearances, but this isn't the first time she's shown this particular side of her personality, he said, looking extremely uncomfortable, like he was about to reveal a decades-old family secret. When your grandpa was dying 12 years ago, Linda was completely focused on inheritance issues and nursing home costs. She actually asked doctors multiple times about speeding up the process because the medical bills were eating into what she considered her rightful inheritance. Are you absolutely serious? I asked, stunned. Your dad and I never told you because we thought grief was making her act irrationally, Greg continued. But seeing how she's treating Ethan right now, I think this is just who she really is deep down inside. Greg stayed for a full week, revealing more disturbing information about my family's true nature than I had learned in my entire 29 years of life. He told me stories about my mother manipulating situations for financial gain, constantly resenting that I had built an independent life for myself, and spreading malicious rumors about my parenting skills behind my back for years. She always wanted you to stay home and be available for Stephanie's kids, Greg explained. Maybe even move back in to take care of your aging parents. Ethan's accident wasn't a tragedy to her. It was an opportunity either to get rid of what she saw as your burden or to force you to come home broke and completely dependent on the family. When Greg finally left to go back home, he hugged me tight and said, Tyler, you and Ethan are going to be absolutely fine. You're tougher than you know, and you're a damn good father. Don't let these people destroy what you've built. After Greg left, I felt pure, focused rage coursing through me. Not the messy, emotional rage that makes you do stupid things, but cold, calculating rage that gets stuff done and makes people pay serious consequences for their actions. That's when Rico and I put our real plan into action. Here's what my family didn't know about my actual financial situation. My plumbing business wasn't just getting by like they assumed. We had landed 4 major commercial contracts: a shopping center, a dental building, an office complex, and a government facility. I had built up solid savings, owned my house outright, had excellent credit, and maintained professional connections throughout the entire city. My mother still thought I was the broke single dad who might need family help someday. She was about to learn exactly how wrong she was about everything. Step 1 of my plan involved calling my lawyer buddy who handles union negotiations. Hypothetically speaking, I asked him, if someone called a hospital asking about ending a child's life support for insurance money, what kind of legal trouble could they potentially face? I told him the entire story from beginning to end. When I finished explaining everything, he was quiet for a very long time. Tyler, what your mother did could potentially be attempted fraud, child endangerment, conspiracy to commit fraud, or even elder abuse depending on how you want to pursue it, he said seriously. You need to document absolutely everything. Every conversation, every text message, every phone call. Step 2 involved reaching out to Stephanie's mother-in-law, Carol. She came from old money and sat on hospital boards, city council, and country club boards throughout the area. She knew everyone who mattered in our community and had never liked how my family treated me over the years. Tyler, honey, I had absolutely no idea they were being this cruel during such a horrible time, Carol said when I explained the situation. What can I do to help you and Ethan? Within just a few days, Carol had quietly spread the word about what my family had done throughout all the right social circles. In a town where reputation matters more than anything else, word travels incredibly fast, especially when it involves someone calling hospitals asking about killing children for money. The response was immediate and absolutely brutal. Derek was currently up for promotion to senior partner at his investment firm. The senior partners, who were all close friends with Carol, suddenly seemed much less interested in promoting someone whose wife supported ending a child's life support for financial gain. My mother's volunteer coordinator position at the church was quietly terminated. The pastor suggested she take some time to reflect on Christian values of compassion and family support during times of crisis. My father's landscaping business started losing clients immediately. Word had spread that he had called his grandson's fight for life attention-seeking behavior. In a community that values family above absolutely everything else, that kind of attitude was complete business suicide. But I was just getting started with the consequences they would face. Ethan woke up on a Thursday morning exactly 5 weeks after the accident. He was groggy and confused, but he was alive and conscious and talking. "Dad," he said in a tiny, scratchy voice that was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. "Hey, buddy, how are you feeling?" I asked, trying not to cry with relief. "Like I got hit by a truck. Did I miss anything good on TV?" That's my kid, tough as nails with a sense of humor, just like his old man. I documented Ethan's recovery with photos, videos, and detailed notes about his progress, but I shared absolutely nothing with my biological family. They only learned about his miraculous progress through other people in the community. Carol mentioned at the country club how amazingly well Ethan was recovering. The church prayer group celebrated his incredible resilience. The local newspaper even did a heartwarming story about his determination and positive attitude throughout the recovery process. My biological family was completely shut out from all of it. 1 month after Ethan woke up, Stephanie showed up at the hospital completely unannounced. "Tyler, we really need to talk about this ridiculous situation," she said, marching into Ethan's room like she owned the place. "What situation exactly?" I asked. "This absolutely ridiculous feud with the family," she replied. "Mom's genuinely hurt that you won't let her see Ethan. This whole thing has gone way too far. Stephanie, your mother called this hospital asking about ending my son's life support for insurance money," I said flatly. "That's absolutely not what happened," she protested. "She was asking reasonable questions because she was worried about your financial situation. She was trying to be helpful during a difficult time. She asked about organ donation payments, brain death protocols, and life insurance payouts," I continued. Stephanie's face went pale, but she doubled down on defending our mother. "We all know you've been struggling financially ever since Ethan's mom left you. This accident is absolutely tragic, but you can't let it ruin your entire life. Sometimes awful things happen for reasons we can't understand." I stared at my sister, wondering how we could possibly share DNA and have such completely different moral compasses. "Get out of here right now," I said. "Tyler, please be reasonable about this," she pleaded. "Get out of my son's room. Get out of this hospital. Get out of our lives completely. Don't ever contact us again." Stephanie left, muttering under her breath about how I would regret this stubborn attitude when I really needed family money and support in the future. She had absolutely no idea what was coming next. 3 months later, Ethan was home and doing physical therapy like an absolute champion. The kid's recovery was honestly nothing short of miraculous. The doctors had warned us that he might have permanent cognitive or physical disabilities, but he bounced back faster and stronger than anyone expected. That's when the real consequences started hitting my family like a freight train. Carol called me regularly with updates about what was happening to my family, and she always sounded like she was genuinely enjoying herself. "Tyler, honey, you should know that Stephanie and Derek are having some very serious marital problems," she told me during one of our conversations. It turns out that the stress of Derek's sudden career troubles, combined with the intense social judgment about their heartless behavior during Ethan's crisis, was absolutely destroying their marriage from the inside out. Derek's investment firm had quietly pushed him aside after losing several major clients who didn't want to be associated with someone whose family supported ending a child's life support for money. The firm's reputation was everything in their business, and Derek had become a liability. "But here's the really interesting part," Carol continued, with obvious satisfaction in her voice. "Stephanie's been having an affair with her tennis instructor, some young guy named Brad. Derek found out about it, filed for divorce immediately, and he's going for full custody of both kids. The most devastating part was that my text messages about Ethan's accident were being used as primary evidence of Stephanie's character and fitness as a mother in family court. The custody hearing was apparently absolutely brutal. Derek's lawyer read Stephanie's text messages aloud in open court in front of the judge, court reporters, and a packed gallery. "Stop being so dramatic about Ethan's little accident. Kids get hurt all the time," the lawyer read. The judge's face when he heard that testimony was reportedly something to behold. Stephanie lost primary custody immediately and only got supervised visitation rights until she completed extensive parenting classes and psychological counseling. Meanwhile, my father's landscaping business was hemorrhaging money and clients at an alarming rate. His biggest client, a luxury housing development worth over $180,000 annually, dropped him immediately after the project manager, whose own kid had been in a serious accident a few years back, told him directly, "I can't in good conscience work with someone who abandons their own family during a medical emergency." Within 7 months, my father had lost over 75% of his business and was struggling to pay even basic bills. But the absolute best part of this entire situation was what happened to my mother. She tried to take out a second mortgage on their house to pay for Stephanie's expensive divorce lawyer. The bank denied her application specifically because of her reputation in the community. It turns out that trying to convince doctors to kill your grandson for insurance money doesn't make you a good credit risk in the eyes of local loan officers. 4 months after Ethan's accident, I received this absolutely pathetic text message from my mother. "Tyler, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding about everything that happened. I never meant any harm to anyone, especially not to Ethan. Ethan is my grandson and I love him very much. Can we please talk and work this out like adults?" I stared at that message for about 45 seconds, then deleted it without responding. 8 months later, my parents were forced to sell their house because they couldn't afford the mortgage payments anymore. My father's failed business, combined with massive legal fees from fighting my restraining order and Stephanie's brutal divorce costs, had left them completely broke and financially ruined. They moved into a crappy 2-bedroom apartment across town in a bad neighborhood, the kind of place my mother had always looked down on and judged other people for living in. Meanwhile, Ethan and I were absolutely thriving in our new life. The other families from the bus accident had become like an extended family to us. We understood each other's trauma in ways that my biological family never could or would. These people had shown up for us when it mattered most. Ethan was back in school full-time, playing Little League soccer again, and just being a normal, happy kid who happened to have survived something terrible. I started dating Melissa, a paramedic who had actually responded to Ethan's accident call that day. She was tough, funny, incredibly smart, and Ethan absolutely loved her from day one. "Dad, she's almost as cool as you," he told me one day, which in 6-year-old speak means she was pretty awesome. Rico got promoted to foreman on our biggest commercial project, and business was booming so much that we hired 3 more plumbers and bought additional work trucks. We landed a massive contract to do all the plumbing for the new hospital expansion. Yeah, the same hospital where Ethan was treated. Life has a funny sense of irony sometimes. But the final piece of my revenge plan was still coming together perfectly. Carol introduced me to her nephew, who worked in commercial real estate development. It turns out there was a perfect property for sale, a small office building that would be ideal for expanding my plumbing contracting business and establishing a permanent headquarters. The building was owned by my father's former business partner, who was looking to sell quickly after my dad had screwed him over years ago in some shady deal I'd never known about until Greg told me the whole story. I bought the building with cash. I didn't even need to apply for a loan. About a year and a half after the accident, I started getting increasingly desperate phone calls from my family members, and each one was more pathetic than the last. My mother called, "Tyler, please, we really need your help with something important. We're 4 months behind on rent, and your father's health isn't good at all. The stress has been absolutely terrible for both of us." Stephanie called, "Tyler, I know we've had our problems, but I'm genuinely desperate here. I'm barely seeing Sophia and Lucas anymore, and Derek's being absolutely vindictive about everything. Can you please lend me money for a better lawyer?" My father called. "Son, I know things got heated between us, but families should stick together when times get tough. I need work and I know you've got connections throughout the city now." I ignored every single one of their calls and blocked their numbers completely. About 16 months after Ethan's accident, I was at the office going over plumbing blueprints with Rico when my phone rang. It was Uncle Greg, and he sounded excited about something. "Tyler, are you sitting down? Your mom's in some very serious legal trouble," he said. It turns out that my mother had been getting increasingly desperate for money and decided to try filing a fraudulent insurance claim. She reported that all her expensive jewelry had been stolen during a break-in at their apartment. The problem was that she had actually pawned all of it months earlier to pay bills, and the insurance investigator found all the pawn shop receipts during their investigation. She was being charged with insurance fraud, filing false police reports, and perjury. She could face up to 6 years in prison if convicted. But that wasn't all the news Greg had for me. Your dad collapsed on a job site last week. Massive heart attack, Greg continued. He survived, but the doctors say he can't do any physical work anymore. And Stephanie? Derek absolutely cleaned her out in the divorce settlement. She's living in a one-bedroom apartment now and working at a call center for $11 an hour. Wow, that's really something, I replied. Tyler, they're all calling me constantly asking if I think you'd be willing to help them financially, Greg said. Your mom specifically asked if I thought you'd pay for a good criminal defense lawyer. I thought about that for exactly 3 seconds. What did you tell them? I told them they made their bed when they prioritized bathroom faucets over their grandson's life, and now they get to lie in it. 4 days later, my mother called me directly from jail. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Tyler, please don't hang up on me, she said. Her voice sounded completely different. Smaller, older, desperate, and utterly defeated. What do you want, Linda? I used her first name on purpose to show I wasn't considering her my mother anymore. I need help with bail money, she said. The insurance thing is just a misunderstanding, but I need a lawyer and I don't have any money left. Let me stop you right there, I interrupted. You want me to pay for a lawyer to help you commit insurance fraud? It's not fraud. I was confused about the jewelry and when I pawned it, she protested weakly. Like you were confused when you called the hospital asking about killing Ethan for money? There was complete silence on the other end of the phone. Tyler, I know I made some mistakes, but I'm still your mother, she said finally. Family is supposed to help family during difficult times. You're absolutely right about that. Family does help family, I agreed. Where was that energy when Ethan was dying in the hospital? That was different, and you know it, she said. No, it absolutely wasn't different at all, I replied firmly. You showed me exactly who you really are. You prioritized your bathroom faucet over my son's life. You asked doctors about ending his life support for insurance money. You called his fight for survival attention-seeking behavior. I could hear her crying on the other end of the phone. Good. You want to know what's really funny about this whole situation, Linda? I continued. You thought I was broke this entire time. You thought I needed your help and support. You had absolutely no idea that my business was doing incredibly well. You could have been part of Ethan's life, part of our success story. Instead, you chose to be a greedy, heartless person who saw dollar signs when she looked at her dying grandson. Tyler, please, I'm begging you. I'm completely desperate, she sobbed. I'm completely done with you. Don't call me again. A week later, Stephanie called from yet another number. Tyler, I know you're angry with all of us, but I'm absolutely desperate here, she said. I can barely afford my apartment rent, and I'm only seeing Sophia and Lucas every other weekend with a court-appointed supervisor. Derek's being completely cruel about everything. I just need a loan. $18,000 for a better family lawyer. I'll pay you back as soon as I can get back on my feet. Stop talking right now, I said. I just need help getting my kids back, she pleaded. Stephanie, do you remember exactly what you said to me in the hospital while Ethan was unconscious? I asked. I was upset and scared and not thinking clearly, she said. You said Ethan's accident happened for a reason. You called it a little accident while he was in a coma fighting for his life. You told me to stop being dramatic while my son was hooked up to life support machines. I didn't mean any of that, she protested. You showed me exactly who you are when things get difficult, and now you want me to pay $18,000 to help you. Here's my counteroffer. Go pound sand. I hung up and blocked that number too. My father was the last one to call about 8 months later. His voice was weak and shaky, and I could tell immediately that his health had deteriorated significantly. Tyler, I know we've had our differences over the years, but I'm really sick and I need help, he said. The medical bills are piling up, and we can't afford the medications I need to stay healthy. Dad, you told me my son's fight for life was attention-seeking behavior, I replied coldly. You said Mom's plumbing was more important than Ethan dying. You want my help now? I was wrong about everything. I was scared and said stupid things I didn't mean, he said, his voice breaking. You were scared? How do you think I felt watching my son hooked up to machines for weeks, not knowing if he'd ever wake up or what condition he'd be in if he did? I asked. Son, please, I'm begging you, he said desperately. I'm not your son anymore, I said firmly. Real sons get supported when their kids are dying. Real sons don't get accused of attention-seeking during the worst moments of their lives. The best part about all these conversations was that they all happened while Ethan was in the background, completely healthy and happy. He was playing video games or doing homework or practicing guitar, completely oblivious to the fact that his biological grandparents and aunt were desperately begging for money. He didn't need to know any of it. He had a real family now. Me, Melissa, who I'd proposed to and was planning to marry, Rico and his wife Maria, who'd become like aunt and uncle to him, and all our friends who had actually supported us when it mattered most. Ethan was absolutely thriving in school, playing travel soccer, and had completely recovered from his injuries except for a small scar on his forehead that he thought made him look tough like his dad. So here we are, about 2.5 years after the accident, and this is how everything finally ended up. Ethan's now 8 years old, completely recovered, and honestly the coolest kid I know. He plays travel soccer, gets straight A's, has tons of friends, and wants to be either a plumber like his dad or a doctor like the one who saved his life. Melissa and I got married last spring in a small ceremony. Ethan walked her down the aisle and told everyone at the reception that he officially approved of his dad's choice in women. Rico's now my full business partner, and we've got 14 guys working for us across multiple crews. We landed the contract to do all the plumbing for the entire new hospital expansion. Yeah, the same hospital where Ethan was treated. Sometimes life has a perfect sense of irony. 8 months ago, I got one final phone call that brought everything full circle. My mother had been sentenced to 5 years in prison for insurance fraud and elder abuse. She was calling from prison using someone else's phone time. "Tyler, I'm truly sorry for everything that happened," she said. "I know I was wrong about all of it. When I get out in a few years, can we please start over? I want to be a real grandmother to Ethan." I thought about that for exactly 1 second. "Linda, you had your chance to be a grandmother when it actually mattered," I said. "You chose to ask doctors about killing him instead. You chose your bathroom faucet over his life. You chose money over family. Those were your choices, and now you get to live with the consequences." "Please, I've lost absolutely everything," she begged. "Good. You should have thought about that before you tried to profit from my son's death." I hung up and went outside where Ethan was teaching Melissa's nephew how to throw a perfect spiral. "Dad, you okay?" Ethan asked, because he's perceptive like that. "Yeah, buddy, just taking out some trash." Tonight, as I'm writing this final update, Ethan's asleep in his room. Melissa's reading a book next to me in bed, and Rico's texting me pictures of the new truck he bought with his profit-sharing bonus. My biological family destroyed themselves through their own greed, callousness, and complete lack of basic human decency. They showed me exactly who they were when my son was fighting for his life, and I believed them. My mother's in prison for fraud. My father's broke and sick with no one to help him. Stephanie lost her kids and lives in poverty. Derek remarried and moved across the country with Sophia and Lucas. They're all alone because they chose money and appearances over family when it actually mattered. Meanwhile, Ethan and I built a real family with people who actually love and support us. My business is thriving, my son is healthy and happy. I'm married to an amazing woman who loves us both, and I have friends who would drop everything to help us, just like we do for them. The moral of this story is simple. When people show you who they really are, believe them. And when family treats you like garbage, you don't owe them anything just because you share DNA. Real family is the people who show up when life gets hard, not the people who disappear or try to profit from your pain. Ethan will never know his biological grandparents or aunt, and that's exactly how I want it. He deserves better than people who saw dollar signs when they looked at his hospital bed. He deserves the family we built, the one that actually loves him, and I sleep perfectly fine at night knowing that every single consequence they faced was entirely their own doing. They made their choices, and now they get to live with them. As for me and Ethan, we're living our best life, surrounded by people who actually give a damn about us. And that's all that matters. When karma is real and justice sometimes actually happens, life's good when you cut out the toxic people and build something real with the ones who matter.